Good morning. Welcome to this morning's Seinfeld discussion on the strike. All right, collective nods. So, where would the group like to start? What did you say?
One of my favorite episodes, because it's about Festivus. So, I mean, to me, overall, we're talking about, of course, several vignettes over the course of the episode. But really, if we're talking about psychiatry, we're talking about George and the PTSD that he has from his childhood. And you see really, really nice snippets of what exactly entailed of his childhood to cause this PTSD. This really rigid attitude from his father, domineering attitude from his father, and him trying to remove himself from that past, but of course embracing it when he's in trouble and he needs an excuse for lying about some fake gift that he's given his coworker because he feels wronged from getting something similar from one coworker. Mm-hmm. So George is always my favorite. I really kind of, in some ways, I'm like, he's right. He's absolutely right. How is he giving tickets, and in return he's getting a donation to some children's fund? How does that benefit him? Mm-hmm. But I'm going out. But at the end of the day, it's about George's PTSD, and it's warranted.
Yeah, here. This is one of the few episodes, and I mean, Frank and Estelle Costanza are, I think, recurring characters more than even Mr. and Mrs. Seinfeld. They often provide us background to their sons, that's George's developmental history. And this is one of those episodes. And we actually could hear a young George in some of the snippets in this particular episode, too. And his childhood certainly does have significant stress. And it's significant stress in as much as it impacts his adult life, and that includes, but not limited to, his adult relationships. In this case, we actually see it result, that is, his early developmental experiences impacting his vocational functioning. Right, so there's a line to draw. Now, the way this comes up in clinical practice is that if he were referred maybe through a work EAP for counseling or therapy, I think some of the stuff that Larry David focuses on or chooses to focus on in this episode, this strike, would come up or should come up. And we talk about elements of post-traumatic stress. I think for purposes of your shelf exam, a couple weeks, or whenever we have you taking shelves these days, it is very likely that for post-traumatic stress or even acute stress disorder, now in George's case, it is beyond 30 days, so we're going to call it post-traumatic stress disorder. You're going to see elements that I think most people would identify as criteria for the diagnosis, so nightmares, flashbacks, exaggerated startle response, hypervigilance, and avoidance behavior. Those are the big five. And those five symptoms cut across about three criteria sets. The DSM-5 complicates this a little bit, kind of removing the avoidance criteria, breaking that down. But for all intents and purposes, those five symptoms, those five signs do cut across about three criteria sets, depending on how you want to study the illness. On the other hand, individuals, but perhaps not named George, or maybe actually in some episodes, George Costanza himself, might demonstrate aspects of PTSD, may actually rule in for PTSD, but reliably tell you, I've never had a nightmare flashback, I don't experience hypervigilance or exaggerated startle, and I don't avoid. Right? 0 for 5. Because of the way the DSM is set up, with multiple criteria sets and only requiring specific criteria from each set, an individual can actually rule in the absence of all of those quote-unquote more traditional signs and symptoms. Right? So the idea here that I just want to float is that there is poor negative predictive value in the 5 signs that we usually attribute to PTSD. Right? So that's a major, probably more of a clinical pearl, because I think on exams you are very likely to actually see at least 1 or 2 of those symptoms pop up, and therefore red flag, go to that answer set, find PTSD. And George is a good example of that. I mean, I don't think George has ever had a nightmare or flashback. I'm not sure if he's hypervigilant. And I'm trying to think. 1 or 2 episodes, there's a little bit of an exaggerated startle. I'm not going to go off on a tangent because it happens to be one of my favorite episodes. But for all intents and purposes, not a lot there. But he probably does have other criteria that he fulfills nonetheless, even in the absence of those more traditional criteria. Other thoughts about George Costanza and the strike?
He kind of demonstrates his persistent cross-domain insecurity with how he uses the human fund, even how he's speaking to Jerry about it. He talks about being a philanthropist, but not for the pretense of goodwill or even like tax reasons. It's like, oh, so people have to kind of grovel to me and like come to me and like I have to be important to them. Really demonstrating his like need for external validation there.
Yeah, not to jump ahead, because again, you don't want to put somebody into a time warp when they're in psychotherapy, but my gut says is that if in therapy I'm not seeing this particular individual use altruism as a defense, and probably in lieu of that would probably assume a more immature defense that is rigid and maladaptive. And then which one depends on the episode, really, because he is so diverse in his maladaptive nature that we could probably choose an episode and find a defense. Altruism's not going to be one of them.
I thought Frank was just a really interesting father. That description of the fight that he had at the store many years ago, when he decided to make festive as a holiday, when he got into a fight with somebody over the last doll, I think, the doll or toy, and the toy was destroyed in the fight, and what he got out of that was not, maybe I went a little overboard for this toy, but, Christmas is bad and I need to make my own holiday. So this little, reshaping of reality to kind of fit your own convenience, this violation of, somebody's bodily, autonomy to go reach and pick up a toy that's on a shelf. This idea that, something that's public property that he hasn't bought yet, like, belongs to him. I don't know, like, mildly, like, that's just one instance that we're hearing, but I feel like, the way in which he told that story and some of the features of that story are a little bit suggestive to me of like antisocial personality disorder.
Yeah, I think we've discussed this with George, and now we know perhaps where George gets this from, but the concept of that external locus of control in situations like this that Frank himself describes, that external locus allows him to displace blame. And that is a clinical criterion of antisocial personality disorder. Now, I don't know if Frank, and I doubt if Frank actually has evidence of conduct when he was 15 or younger, but it is a criterion for antisocial personality displacing blame. And that comes from his external locus. It's that same void that will or prevent people like George and Frank from taking credit for things that happen that are positive. Right? So if something positive were to happen, it's difficult for them to understand, I was able to contribute to this, this is actually on me, I was able to actually achieve this. It's more along the lines of, well, I mean, because so-and-so did what they did, I was able to do what I was able to do. So it's that external locus that we see actually have a two-pronged sword here. In this case, something does go horribly wrong with that toy. It's not even his. And because he's displacing blame, he has that external locus, he creates this new holiday called Festivus, and we actually see the byproduct of that. How about outside the Costanzas? Any other subplots, any other characters you want to discuss this morning? Elaine?
So,
What's happening with Elaine?
I think it's funny that she gives her phone route that's like no Elaine to the guys that she meets because she doesn't want to talk to them, which is like fine, but it's the card, it's like when she has the 23 subs card and is like fixated on getting that 24th sub and doing whatever it takes to get that card back. Kind of reminds me a little bit of like the obsessive-compulsive personality. because she's fixated and like compelled to get this card back and to actually complete the 24. So she's like, I already went through all this misery. They're really terrible subs, but I need to get that fourth one, even though it's not, or the 24th one, even though it's not going to bring her any joy. She doesn't like it to begin with. So it's like she needs to finish out that series of 24.
Yeah. And hypothetically, if Jerry were to stand in and say, listen, I mean, just like alleviate, I mean, just step back for a second and let's just not allow you to put yourself through any of this. I'll pay for this. I'll pay for the next 48 subs. What do you think Elaine's response to that would be?
She said no.
Yeah.
She did
Yeah.
at the bagel
Yeah.
shop when he offered her. So she's like, no, I want my sub.
Right.
Even though the bagel shop probably would have been better.
And that's because it's not about the money. And that is significantly consistent with your observation. And this is an obsessive-compulsive personality trait. Now, being frugal or miserly is a diagnostic criterion, but it's much bigger than that for OCPD. And in this case, it has nothing to do with the money. She would still do the same exact thing. I agree with you. If someone like Jerry offered to pay for it anyway, or even replace all 23 plus. Right. Other aspects of OCPD, which ironically, Jerry has.
She spends a significant amount of time trying to get that card, which I think is interesting. Not letting her do anything else with her day.
Mm-hmm. And there's your clinical significance, right? Time spent,
Mm-hmm.
right? Time invested. How about outside of Elaine's character or anything she displays in terms of the actual shelf exam? What else might you see in a clinical vignette where obsessive-compulsive personality is your single best answer?
Perfectionism.
Yeah. Yeah.
Rituals.
Ritualistic behavior. Well, ritualistic behavior allows for a broadening of the differential to include what?
OCD.
Yeah, it's OCD. Yeah, that's the anxiety disorder. Good. Anything else for Elaine here? It's interesting too that another another example of frugality in this situational comedy happens to be George, right? But other than his miserly spending style, he has like zero other components or diagnostic criteria for OCPD. But so here's Jerry, who I think is iconic for the definition. I mean, he's like the textbook definition of OCPD. We see Elaine now having aspects of this condition. George certainly has at least a singular aspect of this condition as well. Kramer, I'm not so sure. What's Kramer doing in this episode?
Kramer's a working man again.
Yeah.
Momentarily.
Yeah.
I think when he breaks the machine, that's like showing some like anti-social personality as well.
Destruction of property.
Very
Anything else?
impulsive. He will do something just on a whim and then not do it on another whim and then show up at Festivus and then not like Festivus.
Yep. Yeah, I think this is probably a good time for to review I think a significant clinical pearl. Who here, we're off camera, who here is not going into psychiatry? Usually I ask who is. Right? So I change it up to Friday. For individuals who are not going to be practicing psychiatry, of course, I'm going to reassure you, and you've heard this before, you're going to hear it again, then you're going to see it. A lot of people with psychiatric illness are going to present to your OP clinic, to your internal medicine clinic, and to your family practice clinic, etc. And it's probably a good idea to understand the general description and definition of a personality, and therefore a personality disorder. So, 8 o'clock in the morning, 8:15 in the morning, God bless you. On a Friday is not the time to deep dive those textbooks on personality theory, Freud, Jung, Sullivan, etc. But the American Psychiatric Association has, I think, the easiest definition. It's a 4-part definition, and off of that definition, we can then begin to tease out what a personality disorder is. So the APA says that a personality has 4 components or domains. Right? Impulsivity, since you brought it up, is one of them. Does anybody know the other 3?
So you're saying characteristics that cut across every personality disorder?
Yeah, but I mean, if you look at the personality disorders chapter, it's actually literally printed in 4 bullets or numerals right there. Impulsivity being one. What are the other three?
I guess like present in multiple circumstances.
We're going to get to those two. So we need the four-part definition
Lack of
before.
insight?
Insight? No, insight's not one of them.
Avoidance.
Avoidance, not one of them. Cognition is one of them,
Mm.
right? Cognition is number two. Interpersonal functioning, number three. And affectivity, number four. Okay.
Number two.
Number two was, yeah. So again, impulse control, cognition, interpersonal functioning, and affectivity. Four-part definition, 4 domains of a personality. If an individual has deficits in 2 of those 4 domains, they are ruling in, or they screen positive for personality disorder. Okay, now we could talk about the remaining parts of the definition. Right? If what? We already heard one of them.
It's present in multiple circumstances.
Right? So it's got to be present in across multiple situations, settings. We'll call that pervasiveness. Right? So you can't demonstrate deficits in 2 of the 4 as you're sitting around this table at work, school, education, and then step outside of the hospital and then have those normalize. That's not a personality disorder, right? Because it doesn't just change setting. Pervasiveness. What else?
With the bird chronic.
Yeah, they have to be stable too. They're stable too. So pervasive and stable. 3 more.
Oh, there's clinical significance.
Good. 2 more. These 2 are so obvious that there might be some hesitation, but they apply to every single mental disorder, including the personality disorders.
Not explained by the medical or substance use.
Okay, and then one more.
Impact on functioning.
We said clinical significance, yeah. Mhm. And by the way, it's good that you repeat that because it needs to be repeated. Many people think that personality disorders, because they're kind of taught on the fringe of psychiatry, it's the way medical schools just set things up. And then there's the erroneous idea, well, they're not clinically significant, where things like bipolar schizophrenia are. It's not true. It's not true. Personality disorders have the D word there. Anytime you see that D word, it means that there's clinical significance. The other one is that similar to the behavior not being attributable to an underlying medical condition or the direct effects of a substance, they also can't be attributed to another mental disorder. Right? So if someone is in a manic phase, if they have bipolar 1 and they show aggressiveness, assaultiveness, a blatant disregard for others' rights, you can't diagnose antisocial personality until the mania is addressed and treated. So that's the general definition. Again, carrying this back as a clinical parole. Your individuals will present to your clinic with aspects of this 4-part definition, that is deficits in 2 of those 4 domains. And that's a positive screen for personality. That's when you actually either refer or begin to assess for an individual personality disorder, cluster A, B, or C. At least the way things are categorized in 2024 in the DSM-5. Final thoughts coming to the bottom of the hour.
I mean, we also talk about like Jerry's shallowness in picking a romantic partner once again, like having this kind of fixation on the person's like looks and to the point of like only wanting to see this person in a certain lighting because that's the only way like she looks attracted to him. So it suggests a certain amount of like maybe avoidance of like romantic intimacy and but also some like narcissism as well, like truly not caring about the other people as well.
I actually really like the idea of avoidance here. We don't really think of avoidance in that context. Usually when we think that there might be avoidance as a defense mechanism that even becomes clinically significant, we think of people and places. That's obvious. we usually don't think of situations like this where there's this recurrence or repetitive nature of his, for lack of a better word, sabotaging relationships as kind of a signal or a sign of avoidance behavior. So I actually think you're onto something there. I also want to just mention that the character often referred to by Jerry Seinfeld, the co-director, as well as Larry David, the Two-Face, because as stigmatizing as that term could be, it does relate to our noon discussion as well. So I'm going to leave it there as a tease, and leave that teaser just hanging out there for a few hours, and then welcome everybody back to our live stream at 12 o'clock when we discuss two movies, and that's going to be Fatal Attraction and Gone Girl. All right, see everybody back then.